All right. Just before we kick off, guys, just a couple of pretty big numbers there. So 18.8 billion and 8.64 million dollars. So just bear those numbers in mind for now as we start, and I'm sure you can maybe guess as we go along what those numbers actually relate to, and we'll mention them again shortly. So let's kick off. So thanks for joining. So my name's David Horgan. I'm a principal technology architect here at Oracle. So my background is as a DBA, so a lot of the technology and a lot of the concepts that we'll be talking about today will be quite familiar to me. I would have done them throughout my career as a DBA. So really pertinent question there, how secure is your database? So just before we kick off, we're going to launch a couple of quick polls. If you could just fill them in, and we'll just like to get some feedback on some, some technologies that you're using and some potential topics for webinars as well. So we might just launch a couple of polls there. Salem, please. Thank you. So there's one there. So which database security products are you currently using? It's multiple choice, obviously. So if you're using multiple ones, do select any ones that are relevant. And the second one then, which security topics would you be interested in attending webinars on? And feedback is quite important to us, obviously. This will feed directly into which topics we run next year in 2022. Again, multiple choice again. Okay, I think that's probably everyone. Okay, thanks. So we're kicking off. So how secure is your database is the question. So it's obviously a very pertinent question for the times we're living in. So as we'll see throughout the presentation here, with the pandemic ongoing, cyber attacks, data breaches, these are happening everywhere and they're happening constantly. So we do need to be more vigilant now than we ever have been, probably to ensure that our database is actually protected. So we look at the database security assessment tool and how that will actually help us to make sure the data is protected. So the plan for today is I'll give you an overview of the technology here. So a presentation of around 25 minutes or so, and then my colleague Mihai will take over and he'll give us a live demo of the product then. So Mihai will be using Live Labs and he can guide you through how to get set up with that. But it's something that you all can access. So you can feel free to follow along with Mihai, or you can do it later, whatever suits best. And there's lots of different other lab environments as well in there. So I definitely recommend logging in there and having a look around. It's definitely worth a look. So today is the first of 4 workshops on the topic of database security. And this is in our Oracle Tech Lounge series. So do feel free to register for, any of the other security sessions, or indeed, the other wide range of webinars that we're running in the Tech Lounge series, and those run every second Wednesday. If you have missed any of the previous sessions, they are available on demand as well. So everything is on the one page. You can register for multiple sessions in the one go. So any questions? You don't have to wait till the end. Anything that crops up throughout, please do throw it into the Q&A session. So just the safe harbor statement there, just to mention, look, at anything here isn't legally binding. Okay, so let's get into it. So what's going on at the moment in cybersecurity? So as you're probably aware, there's been an absolutely massive surge in cyber attacks since the pandemic began. That's not really going to be news to you, but the extent of it might actually shock you. So the FBI reported a 400% increase in cyber attacks since the pandemic actually began. Who's responsible for this? Who's carrying out these breaches or these attacks? Well, in 55% of cases, it's actually highly organized and sophisticated criminal groups behind these breaches. Web apps account for 43% of the attacks. So, with any internet connected device, there is an inherent risk there. So that number probably isn't a massive surprise. But this one here, this I did find quite shocking. So 60% of small to medium businesses that suffer a hack or a breach will actually go under within 6 months. So, if you've invested a lot of time into a startup, you've probably invested a lot of your money and your dreams and everything, you build up a company. You've got staff that depend on you for employment to put food on the table. You've got customers that depend on you for services. All of that could be up in smoke, if you neglect your security posture. So it really does kind of underscore that whole cliche or that concept that, if you think having good security is expensive, well, try having bad security, because, it could be a lot more costly and it could even see you out of business. In relation to the pandemic, we kind of touched on it there in the last slide. Since the pandemic began, cyber attacks have surged, but especially we're seeing these in the healthcare industry. And, it really takes a certain type of really nasty person to attack a healthcare industry or facility at any time, let alone during a global pandemic. So not going to go through the stats here in any detail. You can read them there. But just to underline, look, this is what you're up against, okay? So you're up against people that have, absolutely no morals. So if they're willing to attack hospitals or national health services, IT infrastructure, no one is safe. There's no industry safe here. There's no enterprise, small, medium, large. If you've got sensitive data in your database, these guys want it, okay? And it's happening constantly. So you can't sit there and do nothing. You really do have to be proactive in your approach to security. Why are they doing this? Well, they're criminals, okay? There's nothing idealistic. There's nothing glamorous here. They're just looking for money. It's as simple as that. And as we saw in the last slide about web apps being targeted, here we can actually see 48% of the data breaches in the healthcare industry happened internally. So what that says to me is, a firewall is good, but it's on its own, it's never enough, okay? So you do need to lock down your data internally at several different levels. Just make sure that people only ever can access what they need to do their job. And we'll look at that in more detail shortly. So potentially in relation to a breach, there's potentially huge damage, both financially and reputationally. So just a few examples of some of the largest fines that have been handed down in relation to breaches. Google were fined 50 million euro. British Airways were fined 20 million euro. Marriott Hotel were fined 18 million euro. And perhaps even more damagingly, 70% of customers said that they would actually walk away after a breach. So what that says to me is this is not a purely techie conversation. This isn't just for your DBAs to bang heads together. This is very much an organizational, reputational risk issue. So it's a C-level conversation, absolutely. So back to the couple of large numbers we showed at the start. I'm sure you can probably guess what they relate to. So data breaches in the first half of 2021 exposed 18.8 billion records. Okay, and that number is actually from last week, so it's probably obsolete already, sadly. And just coincidentally, the US president's cybersecurity budget for 2021 is $18.8 billion. So nice bit of symmetry there, $1 for every record stolen in the first half of the year. And the second one there, the United States has the world's highest average data breach cost at $8.64 million. So again, back to that whole concept of, obviously it does cost money to put a security infrastructure in place. Security products do cost money, but look how much more expensive it could be if you neglect it and cut corners. And I suppose if all of that hasn't convinced you, well, you still have to comply with this stuff, okay? These regulations, you have to comply with them under law. So things like GDPR, HIPAA, Data Protection Act, these aren't red tape as some people like to paint them. These actually exist to ensure that your private data is protected. And these aren't optional. You have to ensure that you meet these standards. So how does all of this relate to securing your database? So first off, your data is a strategic asset. You know, as well as having private data in the database, there is strategic data in there. So it's going to help you with decision making, really driving your enterprise forward. So you need to protect your data the same way that you protect any of your physical assets. And as we've seen, everyone's a target, okay? So the cyber criminals are attacking constantly. And naturally, as data resides within the database, that very much makes the database a key target. Security should be included by design. Do this stuff up front. Don't try and do it retrospectively, because, you know, it can cause a lot of upheaval to try and, you know, fit it back in. And the problem is it might actually be too late. You know, by the time that you start doing all this stuff, you may have already suffered an undetected breach. And finally, as we saw on the last slide, you have a responsibility to ensure that your databases are secure. So with all of that in mind, how do we actually go about securing the data? Because that can be a really daunting task. It's hard to know where to actually start. So there's a lot of data in your database potentially. There's a lot of the, you know, what we'll talk about in terms of the surface of attack. There's a lot of backdoors and a lot of routes into database for a hacker or an attacker. So the best way to approach it is what we would call a three-phase approach: assess, detect, prevent. Okay, so today we're talking about the database security assessment tool. Naturally, that's going to fall into the assessment phase. Okay, so in the assess phase, we're talking about really getting to know the database, understand the context of the database. So where have you got risky data in the database? What are the most dangerous areas of it? Really understanding where you could potentially have some issues in there. That's the key goal of that assess phase. So what's going to help you with that assess phase is the database security assessment tool, or DBSAT, as we'll call it for short. So at this stage, we're aware of the need to be proactive in our database security, and that can be difficult. Okay, so if you've probably got a ton of sensitive data to protect, we're aware that the implications of a breach are potentially crippling. They could see a business even close down. So the pressure is really on your DBA and your security staff to ensure that this is done correctly, and it's an absolutely major responsibility. So if something goes wrong, it will fall squarely on the shoulders of your DBA, probably, because they're the gatekeepers, they're the safekeepers, the guardians of your sensitive data. So there's an inherent risk, there's an ongoing threat. You need to ensure that the DBA is equipped with the right tools to be able to defend your enterprise against these attackers. And what a lot of DBAs will do, and what I've seen in my own time as a DBA, is a lot of DBAs will have custom scripts to check parameters are set correctly, look at user privileges, ensure users are working off the method of least privilege. And you know, they might be quite confident that they have all the bases covered, but you know, please do trust me, the surface of attack is so large, there is a crack in everything. It's very, very difficult to ensure all the bases are covered. Okay, so if you are using something customized and you suffer an attack and a hacker gets in, the DBA will be asked, well, why wasn't that base covered? Okay, why didn't you catch this beforehand? So what we recommend to use is DBSAT, okay, because it's going to be the most mature, the most comprehensive, and the most sophisticated tool to ensure that your data is actually protected. And it's free, okay? This is free. We're not trying to sell you something here today. This is a free product, okay? So you can just download it and run it. So use this. Your DBA and security staff they're going to be much more better prepared to fight back these attacks then. And the thing is with security, so it's not a big bang approach, okay? Because the surface of attack is so large, because there's such numerous areas that can be exploited, there isn't one lovely secure my database button to push, unfortunately. But rather the approach is, there's a lot of changes to make, a lot of screws to tighten up, and you do all of these things incrementally, and then cumulatively over time, they all add up to give you a much more stable and a much more secure environment. So DBSAT, as we said, look, it's a free tool. You can download it from My Oracle Support. What will it do? So in a nutshell, it'll check if the database is securely configured in terms of connections, parameters, and users. And it'll give you a really, really thorough, but it is an easy to read, and it's an actionable report of findings and recommendations. you could then go and implement those and really improve and strengthen up your security posture. So it's a mature tool. This isn't brand new or anything. This has been around for a long time. It's been really useful, really successful. We've got great feedback from our customers on this. So as we said, look, it's a great tool to do that initial assessment in the assess phase that we spoke about, and it'll help you to establish your security baseline. So the things that it does, it'll help you discover any sensitive data in the database. It'll help you identify any risky users that you have, and it'll assess the overall security configuration. So it'll check multiple parameters. So things like operating system permissions, any controls in place, like are you using encryption? Are you using auditing? That kind of thing. And then at the end, it'll produce two reports. So one will have sensitive data, and the other will have the security assessment, which is, the database security risk assessment. So let's look at those just in a little bit more detail. So first up, getting to know your overall database security posture. So on screen here is a sample output of the report. So it's going to advise you things like, are your table spaces encrypted? Are users being authorized externally, or are they using password authentication? Are we enabling auditing? What are file and folder permission levels at the operating system levels? And you just do all this. It's really easy to do, really simple steps involved. We'll see these during the demo with Mihai. You just run DBSAT, okay? So if you were to try and write one script customized for each of the aspects here, just for this part alone, without even getting into the rest of what DBSAT does, you'd be a very long time doing it. And as we said, there's every chance that you'll miss something. So we do encourage you to use this tool because, as always, an Oracle tool is going to work best with an Oracle database, okay? It's going to make sure that everything is covered for you. So once you've done that initial part, which is kind of more on securing the infrastructure around the database, next up is about getting to know your users. And this is absolutely critical. So we speak about the method of least privilege, and there's no point doing all that hard work from the last slide in terms of, encrypting data files, turning on auditing, locking down the operating system. There's no point doing all that hard work if you give everyone carte blanche and too much access directly through the application. So with the database software, there comes a number of very powerful roles. And what's a role, for anyone who doesn't know, if there's any DBAs here, this will be bread and butter to you. You'll know all this stuff, but just for anyone that doesn't know, a role is a collection of privileges. What's a privilege? A privilege is something like allowing user A to see a table in user B's schema. Okay, so in any application, obviously any user is going to need, access to multiple tables, multiple functionality objects. So generally, it's not going to be the most efficient way to grant them one by one. So what we would do is bundle a bunch of privileges into a role and then grant the role to a user. Okay, it's just a much more efficient way to do things. Now, that's with a customized application, that's fine. But, it's important to remember with the database, there's a number of out-of-the-box roles come as well. Okay, and the most powerful one of these is the DBA role. So if you give someone the DBA role, it's basically giving them the keys to the kingdom. Okay, you're giving them carte blanche to view, alter, delete any piece of data in the system. They can export out the database. They could even drop the database. Okay, completely delete it. So goes without saying, you need to be really, really careful handing that one out. And there's other really powerful roles too. Just be really careful with those. So what we're saying is work off the method of least privilege. Okay, give everyone enough to do their job, but no more than that. So if there's any data that you don't need to be able to see within the database, you don't need access to that. Okay, that can stop both malicious and accidental data breaches internally. So what DBSAT will do to help out with this is examine all of a user's access, and indeed even if the users are still in the system. So what we see sometimes is if someone leaves a company, has their account actually been removed from the database, or can they still access the system? So DBSAT will identify those dormant accounts as well as the access of active accounts. So it's very thorough, DBSAT, in this crucial aspect of database security. So again, like with the previous ones, these are things that you can check with custom scripts. But again, look, this is going to be much more reliable and much more comprehensive for you. So let's quickly fly through the types of feedback that it provides based on users. So in this slide here, we can see any users using the same default passwords that come out of the box. So with the database, there comes a number of default schemas, and they always have the same passwords. So any hacker worth their salt is going to have a script in their toolkit to try and log in with those credentials. So basically for these schemas, the recommendation will be either change the password if you're using them, or if you're not using them, just get rid of them, just drop them completely. Okay, so that is an example of how we're now narrowing that surface of attack. Okay, we've closed a couple of backdoors into the system there. We've covered off a couple of bases. We're narrowing the surface of attack. And that's the idea. That's what it's going to be like. It's going to be lots of small recommendations like that, but they do all add up to a much more stable and secure system. With this one here, we're identifying any user profiles not using password verification functions. So these would force users to use stronger passwords. And as you can see, look, the report is really clear. It gives you status, summary, details on who's affected, an explanation of what it's about, and then a reference to which industry standard the recommendation actually stems from. So it's not theoretical stuff. It's not conceptual stuff. It's really good, practical, actionable recommendations. And there's loads more like this, but just the last one to show you here is anyone granted directly or indirectly the DBA role that we spoke about. And the status here will be evaluate with this one, because, you know, it's a case-by-case basis. There's no one-size-fits-all recommendation, because some of these users might actually need that role, okay? So it can't give you a definitive answer on that. It can't, it's not so set in stone that it can say remove it or keep it. But what it'll certainly do for you is highlight a potential issue. And then what you do with it is up to yourself. And the last part that of the system is getting to know where you have sensitive data within your database. So you run the sensitive data report, and it'll look for common patterns within the data, in column names, in descriptions, and it'll highlight anywhere where you might be storing very sensitive and critical data. And in turn, then what you'll need to do is, you know, ensure very limited access to that table. So here we're getting a summary of potentially sensitive tables, columns, and rows. Then it starts getting a bit more granular with it, and we can see in which exact tables we have things like addresses, credit card numbers, social security numbers, health records, whatever it may be. So it's just a really lightweight, it's a really useful tool, help you to get to know the most sensitive areas of your database. So the key thing that we want from this assess phase, as we said, is understand the context of the database. Where are we at? Where have we introduced risk? How are we configured set up? And then once you understand all of that, you can then start making your remediation changes and narrowing that surface attack that we spoke about. So 3 components to it. Best practice, run all 3. You can run your sensitive data report. It doesn't really matter which one you run first, whether you run the sensitive data or the security assessment, but just for the sake of this example, let's say we run the sensitive data report first, and that'll give you 1 report. Then you could collect your configuration and user related data, and then finally reporting, which will give the report based on what you've just collected there. And we'll see that in greater detail. It'll hang together, and, you know, properly visually when you see it, when you see Mihai running through this. But just to give you an overview of the process here, but it is a really simple process. So first up there, as you said, run your discover job and discover your sensitive data. The collector and the reporter kind of go hand in hand. So initially run the collector, and it'll pull all of the metadata required to examine and report on. And what the report job will do then is generate a report, and generally that'll be in, you know, HTML, nice, easy to read report. Just one caveat with that: the reporter, you'll actually need Python installed on the database host or wherever you're running it. So, you know, we're conscious that a lot of people won't have Python installed on the host, and you'd be quite slow to install things that you're not going to be using constantly on a database host. So what you can do is take the files generated by the collector, run the reporter on another server then where you do have Python installed. So those are the core components. Just wanted to give you a quick overview over here, and we'll see those again in greater detail shortly now. And just the last slide from myself. Won't go into these in any great detail, but really this is just to say this product is constantly evolving and improving. Okay, this isn't obsolete technology. There's a new release from just 2 months ago, and it's constantly building. So this is core functionality for us. So that's it for me. So just before I hand over to Mihai, just to mention as well, at the moment we're running a free assessment, a free security assessment. So sure, as we said, DBSAT is free itself, and you can go and generate the reports. But we're offering a service whereby you run DBSAT in your environment, generate the report and the files, and you can send that in to us, and our team of experts will put together a presentation on what are the most crucial aspects that you need to look at in your own environment. Okay, this won't be a generic report. This will be totally specific to your own environment, and that's free also. So imagine that, Oracle giving you 2 free things in one day. So if you are interested in that, by all means reach out to myself. My email address is there, or reach out to your account manager ideally, and we'll set that up for you. So over to Mihai now. Thanks for listening, guys. Hope that gave you a good overview and a good understanding of the technology. Mihai will walk us through a demo of it now.
So, hello everybody. My name is Mihai Costeanu. I'm part of the data management team in the Technology Software Engineering Hub. And today I'm going to walk you through the demo on DBSAT, Database Security Assessment Tool. The support for this demo is this Oracle Live Labs workshop, which is called DB Security Database Assessment Tool Workshop. And as David mentioned earlier, on this Live Labs portal, we have tons of interesting workshops that you can follow, and they are free of charge as well. And let me provide you a short walk around on how you can reserve this workshop. So if you access this workshop, you just need to search, for example, for database assessment here in the search area, and then you will be directed to the actual workshop. You click on it, and you have 3 options to provision the workshop. One is automatic. The Live Labs will create automatically a free trial, a cloud account, and this workshop will run on this free trial account, and you will be able to use this workshop until the credits will be consumed. The other option is run on your tenancy. So if you already have a cloud account, you can provision this workshop directly on your cloud tenant, and then you'll be able to use it as long as you consider. And the third, and the options that I choose for today, is reserve the workshop on Live Labs. Basically, you will be assigned an instance on the internal Live Labs cloud tenant, and then you just need to connect to that instance and follow the guidelines for the workshop. And in our lab in our workshop for today, we will be able to work with the DBSAT tool and understand how it functions and the immediate value that it provides. So as we know, many customers already benefited from running this tool, DBSAT, and they were able to improve their security posture. DBSAT will help you identify the overall security situation on your database, who are the users and their entitlements, and know how much and where it is sensitive, the sensitive data is located. And the plan for today is to go through the following functions and features. So first of all, we will install DBSAT. We will collect data. We will generate the report. We will analyze the summary of the report. We'll go through the findings. We'll go also to the details of the report. Then we'll create a discover sensitive data report. We will analyze this report, the summary, and so on, and the other findings that we get in this report. Then we will try to parameterize somehow the discovery report, like accessing the DBSAT configuration files and change the parameters and see how the data is retrieved. And also at the end, we will be processing the DBSAT report in the JSON output format. And last but not least, we will install uninstall DBSAT tool. So what I did prior to this workshop, I already created a SSH connection to the machine that I was already provided when I reserved the workshop. Basically, when you reserve the workshop, and you have two options: to start the workshop right now or to start the workshop at a future point in time. And when the time for your workshop starting arrives, you will be prompted with an option to launch the workshop, and you will be directed to this page. In this page, you will have all the necessary data and information to connect to your cloud instance on which the workshop will run. For example, you can use Cloud Console to access the machine, or you can directly use the IP address, the primary key that you provide when reserving the workshop, and the user, and that's it. You will be able to connect to the instance. This is what I already did. So I have an SSH connection to my compute instance, and I am connected with user OPC. And what we'll have to do now is just start following the labs that are part of the workshop. So first of all, you will need to sudo su as Oracle user. We are going to navigate to the path on which we have the DBSAT tool downloaded. We will create a dummy directory for the tool, and then we are going to unzip the downloaded archive for the tool in that file. Okay, it's unzipped, and now basically this is the process of installing the DBSAT tool. It's very straightforward. You just unzip the archive, and that's it. The tool is installed. Now we will start by collecting some data with the tool. We are navigating to the directory on which we unzip the tool. And we are issuing the DBSAT command just to see what kind of parameters do we need to correctly execute the command. And as we can see, we have here a set of information about what kind of options do we can use to run the DBSAT tool. And we have a pluggable database on this machine. It's called PDB1. And we will execute the DBSAT tool against this pluggable database. And we just need to follow the directions that we get by executing the tool. For the ease of use, I am going to provide for each time I am asked for a password, I am going to provide Oracle 123. Okay, and now the tool basically starting collecting information. It will take a couple of minutes. One more thing, this tool needs a database user with appropriate permissions in order for it to be able to access all the database objects and so on. So prior to executing the data collection of the tool, we just need to have this user created at the database level. It's called DBSAT admin. All the necessary information for creating the user are provided in the MyOracle support note for the DBSAT tool. Okay, I am prompted again for the password in order for us to encrypt the output. And this is very important because since it retrieves important information from your database, it's necessary for the output to be encrypted. I'm going to provide the same password, Oracle 123. Okay, and now the output file, JSON file, was generated successfully. Now, from the JSON output file, we can generate the report. So the command for generating the report is DBSAT report and the name of the JSON file without the extension. We execute the command, we provide the password. Okay, and now the JSON file is inflated in an archive, and again, this archive will need to be encrypted. So you need to password protect it. I will use the same password. And in order for you to access the files that were generated at a later point in time, you just need to specify this password when opening the files. As you can see, the report generates 4 types of files: a TXT file, an HTML file, which is very good for reading, and XLS files when you have all the findings grouped in a tabular manner, and this is very useful for making some aggregation at the report level. And you have as well JSON format which can be used to directly import data in the database. You can create a table and then import the data from the report directly in that table, but we'll see that at a later point in time. Okay, now we can unzip the report. And now the files are extracted. Now, because this machine does not have graphic user interface, we are going to use Glassfish server to add the file to the Glassfish server location, for example, the HTML file, and then using the link provided, you will be able to open it in a browser. But this is only due to the configuration of this machine. You can as well just download the HTML file to your workstation and then open it with no problems. Okay, and this is how the output of the DBSAT tool looks like. This is the assessment date and time, information about the database. Okay, and we also have the summary table, as David described in the presentation, the earlier presentation. And the findings are grouped by categories. We have pass, evaluate, and advisory. These are not evaluate and advisory are only some suggestions. They are not potential risks. You just need to evaluate them and decide if they are risks for your database or not. And also we have the other 4 categories for low risk, medium risk, high risk, and the total findings. So again, you have to follow the recommendations by their priority and take the appropriate actions to resolve the problem. Now we will go and analyze a little bit the findings. For example, if we go to a high risk finding, okay, we can see that the last comprehensive patch was not found. So the last patch that was applied was 216 days ago. And we see for each findings the following sections: the type of risk, the summary, a short description of the finding, details about the findings. In this case, we have information related to the comprehensive patches that were applied, remarks that provides a short description about what's the risk and what are the recommendations to resolve this risk. And at the end, we have the references. For example, in this case, the reference for this recommendation was CIS Oracle Database 12c benchmark. So depending on the active security standards that are in place in the industry at the time being, we get these kind of recommendations and their priority and the actions that we can follow to fix the risk. And For example, this was one of the high risk recommendation. I will also show you, for example, medium risk one. So this is one of the medium risk recommendations, and as you can see, in this case, we found two sample schemas that are still present in the database, and from the current security standards that are in place, this is not a good thing. So we need to take the appropriate actions and remove these sample schemas. Again, this recommendation is in line with CIS Oracle Database 12c benchmark standard. And we will also see a low risk recommendation for the inactive users. For example, in this database, we found 41 users accounts that would remain open even if inactive, and 40 unlocked users inactive for more than 30 days. And here is the remarks that provide a description about this finding. And again, on the reference area, we can see what's the standard that was the reason for triggering this low risk alert. So this is the kinds of information that that the DBSAT tools report offers you. It goes through all the important sections, database sections from security point of view, user accounts, privileges and roles, authorization control, fine-grained access control, auditing, encryption, database configuration, network configuration, and also the operating system. So you will get a full view on your database setup from security, database configuration from security point of view. Okay, and this is the way you can generate the database security assessment report. And now we will go to see how we can discover sensitive data at your database level. So in order to perform this operation, we will need to go to the location in which we installed the DBSAT tool. In the Discover folder that comes with the tool, and in the conf area. Now, this Discover sensitive data uses a configuration file to generate the report, and this configuration file is called dbsat config. And we will create, we will use the sample dbsat config to create a dbsat config file that will be used for our database. We just need to copy the sample file to the dbsat config file, set the appropriate permissions, and then edit the file. This is how the file looks. It has information related to TNS admin, net service name, wallet location, DB host name, port, and DB service name. What we'll have to do in order for the script to work, we will need to edit the configuration file and provide the database service name. In our case, it's PDB1. We just then need to write and save the file. And that's it. The configuration file is ready for use. We just need to go up to directories in the DBSAT installation directory. And now we are just going to trigger the script to generate the discovery report. Now we are just going to enter the database username that was especially created for the DBSAT tool, and the password, which is Oracle 123 in this case. And now the report was generated. I am specifying the same password. Okay, and the report PDB1 DBSAT discover HTML was generated. Now we are unzipping the file. We are providing the password, and that's it. The archive, the files from the archive were extracted. And of course, to be able to read the output, I'm going to execute the same step to publish the file on the Glassfish server, and then just use the link to access the report. And now, basically, we are just going to copy the link, enter it in the browser, and this is how the sensitive data assessment report looks like. Now, on the initial section, we see that we have information related to the date and time of the report, the database version, and the discovery parameters that were used for the sensitive data assessment. And the summary with the sensitive data categories that were taken into account, and the findings. We have the number of tables, the number of sensitive columns, and the number of sensitive rows. So the schema scope equals all enables the tool to analyze all the schemas of the database. If we want to analyze only one schema or some specific schemas, we just need to edit the parameter file for this report and specify the name of the schema. Okay, and in order to see how the findings look like, for example, we just need to go to the sensitive data section, and then we have schemas with sensitive data, for example. And the risk level, for example, is the category of risk. We have high risk, medium risk, and low risk. And we found 6 schemas with sensitive data. And here in the location area, we will see the name of the schemas that have sensitive data. So it's the TMS admin, employee search dev, employee search prod, ACM1, HR, and lookups. Again, we can navigate further in the report, and we detected biographic info address in the following tables, and so on. So this is how the data is categorized by risk level, and how the type of sensitive data categories are analyzed, and this is the output. So you will get all the necessary information in order for you to go directly to the tables and columns that contain sensitive data and take the appropriate action, like masking and so on. We have another interesting section, which is called schema view. And you see how the situation is per schema. Here are the database schemas with sensitive data. We see the tables, yeah, that have sensitive data. And then we see the number of columns, the number of rows, and the sensitive category type for each table. And this summary will provide you a good overview on the situation of your database. Now, of course, with the Discoverer report, we can do some advanced operations. Now, in this lab, we will see how we can edit the DBSAT config parameters in order for us to determine the behavior of the DBSAT Discoverer. So, we need to go to the SSH connection. And that we have a CSV file prepared, and in this CSV file we will see what kind of sensitive data it contains. For example, we just need to go and execute this command on the DBSAT discovery CSV file, and in the data that was retrieved by the DBSAT discoverer, we see that we have healthcare provided sensitive data. Okay, and for example, the FQCN for this particular column, as displayed above, is ACM supplemental data last inst claim. So we will need to copy this FQCN, and then we will exclude this this type of sensitive data from the report, and we will create a file that is called exclude ini. So in order to do so, we will go to the discover configuration folder of the DBSAT tool, and we will create this file called exclude ini. And in this file, we will provide the fully qualified column name of the columns that we want to exclude from the analysis, because it's at your preference what kind of columns you want to exclude when executing a sensitive data discovery report. This is one of the advanced functionalities of the tool. And we need to copy the fully qualified column name for this this column. Okay, we insert it in this file, and then we just save the file, and that's it. We have an exclude ini file that will trigger the exclusion of this this column. Then we will need to go to the DBSAT configuration file, and at the bottom of the file, we will need just to provide the exclusion file that we just created, the exclude ini file, and that's it. The column will be excluded from the analysis. We just need to navigate to this line and insert the appropriate value. Okay, that's it. We will save the configuration file. And then we execute again the DBSAT discover report, but now we will provide a second, we'll be versioning the output in order for us to differentiate it. So this is trial 2. We will append it with V2, and then we just execute the report. We provide the user. We can take it from the above execution. Okay, the password is Oracle123. We wait for the report to be generated. We provide a password for it. Okay, we unzip the report that was generated. Okay, and we publish it to Glassfish. This is the V2 report. We copy the link. And we check the content of the newly created report. And if we search for the type of data that we excluded from the list, we see that there's no more, there is the data is no more present. If we go to supplemental data table, okay, we see that this is the table, supplemental data, and we see that last insurance claim data is not present anymore in the type of sensitive columns that should be discovered, as well in HR supplemental data, ACM1 supplemental data, and so on. So the type of column was removed from the data that should be analyzed. Now, the next thing that we'll try to achieve is making the DBSAT Discover to report to run only for the HR schema and somehow exclude tables with less than 11 rows. So just as a heads up, the table job history that's present in our database has 10 rows. So this table should disappear from the report. If we search for job history, it has only 10 rows, as you can see here. And in each schema, it has only 10 rows. So by parameterizing the configuration file of the discovery report, this table will not be present anymore. And we will try to gather the report only for the HR schema. This is the aim for this, this report. So we are going to, again, to the configuration file. And we will go to schema scope and update the parameter and insert here only value HR. And in the number of rows, in the minimum rows, we will insert 11. Okay, and in this way, we will analyze only HR schema and exclude tables with less than 11 rows. We are saving the configuration file. That's it. And we are executing again the DBSAT discovery report, but now with V3. Okay, let's retrieve the user. 1, 2, 3. We are unzipping the newly generated file. And we are moving it to our Glassfish server, and this is the new report. Okay, and if we navigate to the list of tables, we see that we have only HR related information. Only HR schema was analyzed, and only table job info, job history was removed from the table list. So as you can see, it's very easy to filter the data that the discovery report retrieves. And now we will be moving to another lab in which we will create pattern file, sensitive types, and categories for data. So we will start by adding some sample data to work with in this exercise, and we'll create a schema that's called FIN ACME, and we will insert some sample company financial information in this schema. So what we'll do, we'll connect to our PDB database. We will execute a set of instructions that will create the user, will grant the necessary rights for this user, and we'll create a table. Okay. So we created this user and this table in which we will insert some dummy records. We will be using this procedure to insert data in the table, and we click on commit. And let's check if we have some data in the table. Okay, we have some 100 rows inserted, and we have some dummy company data in the table. Now we will create a pattern file for the advanced discoverer. So what we'll do, we will access the sensitive ini file, but first we'll need to exit the SQL Plus connection. Okay, and let's see the content of the sensitive ini file. So this is the type, the file that dictates to the discoverer report what kind of sensitive data to take into account and what pattern to follow in the sensitive category data. So pattern find contains a selection of sensitive types, their regular expression and categories. And as you see, its sensitive type is defined as follow. So the call name pattern is the Java regex to search the column names. Call comment pattern is the Java regex to search the column comments, and the sensitive category is the sensitive category to which the sensitive type data type belongs to. So DBSAT will parse this pattern file and search for matches on the defined regex p patterns. And the sensitive category parameter specifies the type, the class of the sensitive data. And now we will have a second look at the DBSAT configuration file, because we need to, in order to introduce new sensitive data categories, we will need to change as well the sensitive ini file and the DBSAT config file. And in the DBSAT config file, we have those sensitive categories. And in order for us to add new sensitive categories, we will need to insert a new line here. Out of the box, we have these 19 categories that are displayed here. And as a starting point, for the analysis, these are more than enough to identify the types of sensitive data that you have on your database. But if you want to add more type of sensitive data categories, you just need to edit the DBSAT config file. So now that we will try to edit the DBSAT configuration file, and we will insert a new category at the bottom of the category list. Let's see if we can easily do that. Okay, and this is the new category that we inserted in the file. And in order for this to be a stronger example, we just need to revert back the parameters that we changed. For example, the schema scope, and we will put back all to analyze all the schemas. Okay, number of rows will be set back to 1, and the exclusion list file will be set to its default value, meaning no value here. Okay, now we can save the configuration file, and that's it. And now we will need to go to the sensitive ini file and add the specifications of the new category. We can, of course, add it anywhere we have some room in the file. And I will just insert the type for, okay. And this is the new category that we are going to use, financial info company data. And these are the call name pattern, call comment pattern, and sensitive category that the script will use to analyze the data. Okay, we just save the ini file. We execute a new DBSAT discover tasks, but now with version 4 that will include the newly created categories. Okay, I'm going to use again the DBM. Okay, good. Now we are going to zip the newly created file and then publish the file to Glassfish and then take a look at it. Okay, let's open the file. Good. And now let's search. For financial info. Okay, and as you can see, we have those two categories newly created, financial info bank data, financial info card data. And also we see the related findings for this new category. Okay, now we just need to move to the last but not least of the labs. So we will process a DBSAT report file, JSON type of output, and we will insert it in a table. Okay, so for this, we will need to navigate to our DBSAT file. And we will need to use some sample utilities that are present in the MyRockall support link document that is providing a description about the DBSAT utilities. So you will find this MyRockall support note in the lab guide. And from there, you can download the utilities for DBSAT. Okay, so those two new, let's say, utilities were added: DBSAT diff and DBSAT extract. And we need to go back to our DBSAT directory, and you will use DBSAT extract to extract some findings by their identifiers. So we will create a JSON file using this identifier crypt.tde and conf password file. Okay. And now we will use the DBSAT difference utility to compare to DBSAT reports. So first of all, we will need two different DBSAT reports in order to compare them. This is the first one. We need to wait for the report to be executed. Okay. Now we are going to create a second report. Okay, we were going to unzip it. Okay. And now we will be executing the difference report. So this is the source report, and this is the second report that we will be comparing with the source report. And this is the output. So in this output, we will see the differences between the two reports. Yeah, and if we scroll down through all the categories, we will see one line for the first report and one line for the second report. And in this way, you can compare two DBSAT output reports. For example, if you want to check the situation 2 months ago with the current situation, which you just compare the 2 months old report with the report from the current time, and then you will see the differences. And now we will see how we can load this JSON report into the database for further processing. Basically, we will import the data in a table, and from then onwards, you have the freedom to process the data in which fashion do you prefer. I will connect with a DB account to our database. We need to create a directory object for this purpose. Okay. We will create a table in which we will load the data. And we will insert the JSON report that we created in the database. We issue the commit, and that's it. And now we will execute a select statement in order for us to display the data from this table in a readable fashion, let's say. Okay, and as we can see, you have all the categories from the report inserted as lines in a table. Yeah, and from this point onwards, you can take this information and process it, maybe create a Apex interface, and then create a central repository for your DBSATs from the entire database estate, keep them in one database, and then use an Apex application to just read the data and see the current situation for all your databases from security point of view. Okay, and we reached the last part of the demonstration, which is actually uninstalling the DBSAT tool. This is quite straightforward. We go to the DBSAT tool location, and we just issue this file, and we issue this sh script, and that's it. The tool was uninstalled. So this concludes the demo for the DBSAT tool. We took overview on all the things that we can perform with the DBSAT tool. We installed the DBSAT tool, we collected data, we generated the report, we looked through the sections of the report, the summary section, the finding, and the details. We created a discover sensitive data report. Then we analyzed the report, the summary, and we also edited the DBSAT config files, filtering the data that is retrieved by the discoverer report. We created as well new sensitive column types that should be analyzed by the discoverer report, and we saw that data was captured. We also created pattern files. We processed the DBSAT report JSON output file. We did a quick comparison between two reports. We uploaded the JSON information into a database table, and at the end we installed the DBSAT tool. So I hope you enjoyed the demonstration, and I strongly encourage you to reserve this lab on this workshop on Live Labs, and go through all the steps by yourself, because in the lab guide, all the steps are extensively detailed, and you can get a good understanding about the way the DBSAT tool functions. Thank you very much for your attention. I will stop the sharing, and I'm going to look through the Q&A section. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mihai. That was great. So hopefully everyone that demo really tied together everything that we did in the initial presentation. Hopefully that all makes sense for you guys. We'll stick around here for another 40 minutes. What I'll do is stick the link for the live labs for DBSAT in the chat, and you can navigate through to it from there. If you want to complete it yourselves at home, we'll be here to troubleshoot in the background any issues that you have. Just stick them in the Q&A. If it's not something you want to do right now, by all means, feel free to drop off, but we'll be here anyway. Any questions that you have just in relation to what you've just seen, or in relation to if you want to avail of the service that we spoke about in terms of the assessment, security assessment that we can provide for you, or if you are completing the live lab and you have any questions relating to that, we'll be here for another 40 minutes. Just stick any of those into the Q&A. Okay, thanks guys.